Alright, so it is time to go ahead and scuff sand our paint. So it's fairly straightforward. It's already something that we've been through once. I'm going to take some 600 grit and just scuff sand everything down. Now this is the part where you kind of want to get rid of any sort of drips or other marks like that if you have any. I have a couple of drips right there, so I'm going to try and get rid of those. This is still the early stages, seeing as I just put on the first layer of paint. I'm not all that worried about going straight through. Of course, if you can avoid it, you should, but don't worry if you do. Some of the key things to remember is all the flat surfaces, you do want to use a sanding block, either big sanding block for big areas, or then for smaller areas where that will not fit, use a smaller block. So this would be, for me in this case, would be the belly cut and the carves here, and then the sides. Seeing as the sides do have masking tape on them, I'm just going to do that by hand. So I'm going to fold the paper over 3 times and go from there. But I'll walk you through the process as per usual. I'm just going to work my way around. So little by little, I don't need to sand down the entire thing at once. And this will also very quickly reveal if you have any spots that are high. Like there, you can see I already went through because that part was not flat. So you don't need to do a huge amount of sanding because you are scuff sanding and not flat sanding at this point just yet. Of course, you do want to get rid of any inconsistencies like drips and stuff like that. That is very important for you to actually get rid of at this stage so it doesn't cause any issues later on. One thing that you really do want to be careful about is all the edges and bevels, stuff like that, because those are something that you will easily go through. So just be careful. And as you can see, I'm not going all the way flat. I could do that at this point, but to be honest, it doesn't really make all that big of a difference at this stage. We'll start going through that when we start getting to the final layers of paint. But seeing as this is the first session that I'm kind of sanding back now, it's not that big a deal. Key things to keep in mind: the sooner you can get your surface flat, the better, because that means that you will have much less work to do in the long run. Now here, there's clearly been some sort of dust, so I've gotten rid of that now. Got that all nice and flat. Those edges were raised because there were a couple of drips right there. And the reason why I have no is because this side is not flat, so that will not give me a good surface to actually sand with. This side, on the other hand, is flat. So, and you don't want to be applying too much pressure. So if you're just kind of letting the sandpaper do the work, you are in the clear. Now this is where I have a couple of drips, so I know I'm going to be going through. The main thing is to get those drips under control and flattened out. And remember to always clean your surface up as you go, so you can actually get a clear view of what it is that you're doing. Because if you just have water all over the place and sanding residue, you're not going to see what you're actually sanding down. But they are now gone, and I will be able to rectify that with the next paint layer. Of course, now it looks a bit silly, but like I said, it's the first layer of paint. This is a fairly normal thing that might happen, so don't you worry about that. Nifty little trick to keep in mind is if you have a bowl of water or something like that, if you keep your wet and dry sandpaper in the water bowl, they will last a hell of a lot longer. And if you're doing sanding by hand, for instance, when you move on to the neck, you want to fold your paper over 3 times, which then creates a tool of sorts. And the whole idea is that you're kind of using the flats of your fingers to then do the motions instead of pressing down on your fingertips. Because if you press down on your fingertips, you're going to create divots. At this point, you don't really need to worry about your bevels or your roundovers. You can keep those as they are because they are most prone to breaking through when you're actually sanding. So it's good to kind of build up all the paint on the roundovers. I'm just going to show you the neck real quick before I move on to the sides, because the sides, they work the same way as the rest of the guitar, or the sanding is the same as on the rest of the guitar. So on the neck, once again, you have your paper folded over 3 times, and you just follow the curve. The thing is that you're working with very fine sandpaper, so it's not like you're going to be changing the shape of the neck at all. So don't worry about that. And that's kind of the approach that you're going to do there. And then for flat areas, you're just going to use a sanding block, as you did with the flat areas on the body. Alright, so that's my scuff sanding done. And we are ready to move on to the next layer of paint, or the next session of paint. So I'm going to be doing between 3 and 4 layers of paint. We'll see how it goes. And in between every layer, I'm gonna wait 20 minutes for the paint to kind of cure a little bit before putting on the next layer. So yeah, we'll see how all that goes.
Minutes later.
Alright, so slight issues in painting today. It is extremely warm outside, and the spray paint is not reacting all that well, so I have to postpone this painting session until it cools down. I'll have to see what the finish looks like later on in the evening. If it looks alright, I'll continue on later. But worst case scenario, I'll just do a rain check and try again another day. It is what it is, folks. Okay, so the weather's calmed down quite a bit. It's actually not that bad weather to start spraying again. So, I have now removed the masking from me doing paint, as you can see. There we are. And now it's time to get this flat sanded, or at least as close to flat sanded in preparation for clear coat. There. And again, I'll be using some Maston glossy varnish for this. Pretty much it's the same principle as before. I'm just using some 800 grit, wet and dry, and a good block. And some water, just to try and get everything nice and flat. Now I got this fairly flat already with the last layer of paint, so I shouldn't have that much to do. Not far off flat. And I don't need to get it flat at this point. It's just, it does make my life a lot easier if it is flat. So I'm gonna get as close as possible without going through the paint layers all that much. Because I did use white primer, it would kind of suck to go through the black onto white, because they are not the similar color. They're not similar colors at all. Alright, great. Alright, well that's pretty much flat already. So I'm gonna fold my paper in 3 parts because of all the curved edges. Now I'm gonna give the round overs just a very, very slight wipe. I'm not gonna go and sand all that much because that is where paint and lacquer doesn't build up quite as well as on flat areas. So I'll be more likely to actually go through the paint, which would suck, as I previously stated already. Oh, look at B. There we are. So you're gonna find some what's called tangerine. So these little specks that are glossy still. That means that those are low points. They're little divots. And the goal is to get rid of all those so everything is a uniform, flat surface. And just little circles. Be sure to keep going back with your paper so you can actually see what you're doing and you can see the progress. Now, seeing as this is the same process as before, except just with a little bit more concentration to try and get everything nice and flat, I'm not going to bother filming all of it because you already know the entire process, and I will get back to you when it's time to mask off the fretboard. One thing I'm going to say though, when I'm going along the edges, because I have paint and an unpainted surface, I'm going to be very, very careful not to really break that edge, because underneath that edge there is white paint. If I break that, then it will show. So going along very, very carefully, just pressure of the sandpaper alone. Don't apply any pressure, use a good block and do the same little small circles. And then that should be that. All right.